What's going on, everybody? How you guys doing today here? Beautiful Sunday morning here. I've had my coffee. I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. And it is, 12:30. It's not even morning anymore. Yeah, well, anyway, it is what it is. Weekends go way too fast. Anyway, wanted to go over a couple things here today. Actually, one topic in particular, but I'm sure I'll span into several others. But I was doing some reading here over the weekend and came across a really good article. And we'll highlight this here in a moment because I wanted to go over it because it talked about eventually will the left, now they've gotten rid of Donald Trump, or assumed to be in their eyes, are they going to pull back? Will they be less radical going forward? And I want to go over this article here and kind of give you my thoughts on it because I think that's wishful thinking at its worst. So, but before we get into that, make sure you guys hit that like button, subscribe, all that other good stuff here. I'm jumping around all over the place. Yes, I understand. I'm trying to get the banners working. I'm going to streamline this at some point. Don't worry. It'll get there. But anyway, so let's get into this here because one of the things that we've seen for the past 4 or 5 years is it's just this constant radicalization from the left. I mean, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. When Donald Trump came down from his little golden elevator, he was going on about how, Mexican immigration, how bad that, how bad that was in terms of the illegality, the drug running, the human trafficking. And he was right about all that. As a matter of fact, many of the things that he said, he was right about all along. The problem with a lot of the people from the left is they didn't want to admit to it because, well, if you admit to it, then you can't really virtue signal the way that the left like to do. Well, it got worse. It got worse as time went on. It was Orange Man funny, Orange Man bad. He's having a temper tantrum. It's never Trump, and then it became he's a racist, he's a xenophobe, he was a misogynist, he's this, he's that. I mean, he was take your pick of any number of the negative pejoratives that they have levied against the president ever since he came down back in 2015. Now, go to his inauguration. What did the left do? Not my president. Remember that little line from Madonna when she talked about how she just wanted to blow up the White House? Who could forget? I think it was Ashley Judd, the nasty woman. Yes, Ashley, we get it. You're nasty. You're a nasty girl. That's why we don't want you. Well, anyway, move forward here to 2020. And if you were to take a look at what we're looking at right now in terms of where the Electoral College is going to go, in terms of all the court cases and everything else, the probability of Joe Biden being sworn in on January 20th is extremely high. Now, we can certainly talk about all of the allegations of voter fraud. We can talk about the voter irregularities. We can talk about all these things that are very well documented. And of course, we got to be careful about that because YouTube has their new policy, don't you dare question the election. But the evidence is out there. These are public records. There's affidavit upon affidavit. There's all kinds of stuff out there that tells you that there is smoke somewhere. And where there's smoke, there's always going to be fire. So it would behoove us, and I would especially think that the Biden campaign will want to know where this fire is at, if there's a fire at all. Because wouldn't you, if you want something, wouldn't you want there to be no question that, you know what? No, we want clean. We want clean. We defied the bellwethers. We defied all the early guys' thinking. And we won. No question about it. You want to talk about a way to unify the country? That's how you would do it. I mean, people like me wouldn't like it, but at least, you know what? Leave no stone unturned. But the Biden campaign is not with that. They just want you to essentially STFU and just let us go about our business. Now, of course, I think that's a subject for another day. But I want to get into this article here because this was done by a gentleman. He's a columnist and I want to get this. I want to go full screen on this here because it's actually a pretty good article. Guy by the name of Glenn Beaton Now, Glenn Beaton, he used to write for one of the newspapers out there in Colorado, out in Aspen, and he's a conservative opinion columnist, and now he runs his own blog ever since he's kind of been outed there. Now, in this article here, he asks a very good question. Having lost their boogeyman, the Democrats will lose their evil radicalism. Now, it's not necessarily a question, I suppose, but it does beg the question from me. Will the Democrats stop with their radicalization at this point? Assuming that President Trump is not going to be president come January 20th and that we're looking at a Joe Biden administration going forward, will the left rein themselves back in? Well, Mr. Beaton here writes in his article, and like I said, I thought it was a good article. I can certainly see where he is coming from on this. But let's get into the story here. So you know that he voted twice for Trump, but he was indisputably been a polarizing figure. He doesn't seem to mind. Trump basks in his opponent's hatred, and that is true. I think the president does indeed. He's invigorated. He's quickened by the battle. The Democrats are more than happy to oblige him. The last Republican they hated with this fervor and fever was Abraham Lincoln. At least in the case of Lincoln, the Democrats hated. Our hatred was based on policy, not personality. The Dems hated Lincoln for his policies against slavery. And aside, many millennials think Lincoln was a Dem, and the Southern slave owners were Republicans. It's possible they were taught that. Not only is it possible, but it's actually factual. These are also the same people that believe in the so-called Great Switch, where Republicans became Democrats and Democrats became Republicans, and it's nothing further from the truth. That's been debunked time and time again. In the case of Donald Trump, the Dems originally hated him for his policies, but not just his policies, but his existence. They hated him because he denied the presidency to their anointed one, Hillary Clinton. That hatred grew as hatred does. The Dems went from a party a decade ago that preached love and compassion, though their talk was always better than their walk in that regard, to one that openly hates people who disagree with them. Case in point, all the cancel culture, all the name calling, all the fighting. Article continues here. They canceled, censored, shout down, and name call, and they seem to delight in doing so. Yeah, haters do like to hate. Now they hate everything about Trump. It pleasures them to imagine and even depict his severed head. They've come to hate his hair, his wife, his son, his girth, but they all but crucified him. It was natural that they came to hate his policies too, just because those policies were his. Their hatred of his policies became awkward when it was pointed out that those policies were the same as those as his Democrat predecessor, as in immigrate children in cages memes, or were different but much more successful, as in his tough but pragmatic approach on the Middle East. Such details didn't matter to the Democrats. What's important to people driven by hate is not understanding and justifying their hatred, but feeling and fueling it. And we have seen that with all of the riling people up. You're either, it's that whole Darth Vader type mentality, that Anakin Skywalker, that you're either with us or you're against us. This is consistent with the theory that Republicans tend to vote with their heads while Democrats vote with their hearts. I don't mean that as a compliment to Democrats. Voting with one's heart is much more destructive than it sounds. Hating or loving a person or his policies because you love or hate his policies or his person is childish. It's not the behavior of a responsible electorate. It's the behavior of tribal fools who don't deserve a democratic republic and probably won't have one for long. But it worked for Democrats this time. Barring a successful Hail Mary at the Supreme Court, the Democrats succeeded in defeating Trump with some combination of fraud, the extent of which we'll probably never know, and hatred. And like I said, in terms of allegations of fraud, improprieties, anything else that you want to talk about there is plenty of evidence out there. Now, whether it's corroborated in terms of was it coordinated, what was going on, that's where a lot of the investigation needs to go. Article continues. But Their Trump hatred has no coattails. The GOP picked up a dozen seats in the House where they were predicted to lose many. In the Senate, the GOP is predicted to lose control, but have almost certainly retained it. We'll know for sure after the Georgia runoffs in January. We'll see about that. The American people didn't like Trump's polarizing antics, but they also didn't like the vagrants camping on the sidewalks, pooping in the gutters, decent people having their careers or lives ruined for saying something politically incorrect a decade ago, police being defunded, undisguised socialism, reverse racial discrimination, animus toward religion, loser anarchist thugs seceding from the Union in our once great cities, and crazy theocrats in Iran getting nukes. AOC is not the face of America or even the real face of the Democrats, despite the hungry garbage media portraying her as such. So what next? The Democrats can no longer run against Trump, and Mitch McConnell doesn't exactly put a fire in their belly. The Dems will instead have to govern. The people will judge them on their effectiveness in doing so. Expect moderately left governance, not radical rhetoric. Radicalism, by definition, excludes approaches that are proven to work. Most Democratic politicians know that, and most of them want to get reelected and reelected and reelected. Getting rid of Trump is thus a huge setback to American radicalism. By the way, what is American radicalism? Actually standing and holding true to the Constitution? That's American radicalism? I don't get that. The next 4 years will be prosperous as COVID goes away and the media's obsession with it fades. Politics finally gravitates back toward the middle of the road where most of America lives, and radical fantasies are subdued by the reality, by the GOP Senate, and the desire of Dems not to get trashed again in down ballot contests. In 2024, the Democrats may crank up the hate machine again when a savvy Republican like Ted Cruz, Nikki Haley, or Marco Rubio runs against an ineffective successor to the enfeebled Joe Biden. But it will never operate as well as it did the last 4 years because nobody is quite as hateable or lovable as Donald Trump. He concludes. And so now he gets the last laugh. I don't like you, Mr. President, but I salute you. That last line, I'm not sure if he was referring to Trump or Biden, but here, let's break it down like this here. A couple things here. There's this idea like what he's talking about right now. And it's the idea that if the left end up getting power, and let's just say for the sake of discussion here, let me get myself back into this stream here. But let's just say for the sake of discussion that the left end up getting both the House and the Senate. They're not going to govern moderately like with Mr. Barton. Excuse me, and I'm probably, there we go. Beaton, not Barton, Beaton. What he's noting. And I think what he's noting is actually it's a very wishful thinking type of deal. That now that the Democrats don't have a boogeyman anymore, that they're going to go ahead and go more middle of the road. The problem I see there is the left, the radical leftists, the AOC wing of the Democrat Party, they picked up 3 or 4 other progressives into their caucus. So the squad is no longer going to be just 4 people. Now they're going to be looking like something like 6, 7, 8 members. And then even if Republicans were to maintain the Senate, you got Murkowski, you got Collins, you got Romney. These are the epitome of a rhino, the Republican in name only. So these are people that are just going to want to be liked and loved by the left. And more often than not, I'd be willing to bet we'll vote with the left. You notice lately, too, Mitt Romney's been popping his head out. It's kind of like whack-a-mole. That's kind of how he's been in the past few years. Now, all of a sudden, he's kind of popped his head out, and he's trying to make it seem like he's the de facto head of the GOP going forward. I'm so sick and tired of that carpetbagger. The problem here, and let's get this, take that out. The problem here when it comes to the radicalism of the left is that what we have seen over the past 4 years, all of the massive protesting, all of the yelling at people, the name calling, the cancel culture, the radical race theory, All of that, the rioting, the looting, the burning, the calls to defund the police, all of it. If Joe Biden gets sworn in January 20th, 2021, it will prove to the left that method works. And these people aren't going to be like, well, you know what? It works. So we're going to go and scale back our operation. We're going to get some normalcy in here. They have told you what they wanted to do. If you notice, the left is starting to use, and when I say the left in this sense, I'm talking about your normal Democrats. I'm talking about your radical leftists as well. They're using words like sedition, treason, if you don't accept the results of this election. And I find it fascinating because over just this last year alone, what have we heard? We need to tear down the system. We need to destroy everything and build it from the ground back up. You had the CHOP, the CHAZ, the RAZ, whatever they got. I mean, they keep popping up as these new autonomous zones all over the place. Is that not also treasonous? Is that not also seditious? Many of us on the right here, and we've been called fringe for calling to call these folks out. We have said that much, that the behaviors of the radical left are in effect treasonous, are in effect seditious. But, you know, we didn't want to say anything about, you know, other people didn't want to go on board and say anything and join in with that because, you know, well, that's just going to inflame the left. They're rioting and looting and burning stuff already. How much more inflamed can they be? Like at this point, you kind of really need to put down the bad actors or it will continue to get worse. And I kind of think that's where we're at. If the Biden administration does take hold come January 20th, and there's a Democrat Congress, and even with a Republican Senate, they're not going to have any incentive to govern moderately. They're not going to have any incentive to power share. Do you remember that back in the day? Back when George W. Bush was president and the Congress was it was like razor thin and Democrats demanded power sharing. They demanded that Democrats get like some chairmanships in certain committees. And what did Republicans do? They capitulated. They ended up giving that. You're not going to see anything like that, even with a very close, narrow margin in the House. You will see no power sharing. The left don't do that. The left go in for the kill. There's an article written by Christopher Lawrence on the Wisconsin Conservative Digest. I think you guys should check that out. You know, he talked about how essentially Republicans send in public servants. The left, Democrats, they send in trained killers. They're not here to negotiate with you. They're going in for the kill. And come January 20th, if they take power, there will be no negotiations. There will be no govern from the middle. They're going to go do what they're going to do, and they want you to just go along with it. And don't you dare raise a voice against them. Don't you dare raise a doubt. Because if you do that, boy, they'll continue to levy charges of sedition, treason, and God knows where they're going to go from there. I hope I'm wrong. Don't think I will be. But time will tell. Anyway, guys, I will be back later on tonight. I'm sure I got a couple other stories I want to go over here. I'm going to do it in a podcast form, so make sure to look out for that. You can find a link right down here. The Caramel Conservative right on Spreaker.com. I'll post that up on all the social media platforms, and I will see you guys later on. So make sure you check us out. And as I said earlier, please make sure you like, share, subscribe, smash that like button, hit the notification bell, depending on your platform. And I'll see you tonight. I'm out.